The night after the first impossible incidents at FOB Apache, the base's security cameras began recording things that weren't there. Motion sensors detected movement in empty areas, and Staff Sergeant Webb discovered that someone, or something, had been monitoring his every move since he started his investigation. The Watchers had become the watched. It was 0230 hours on October 16th when Corporal David Martinez first noticed something was wrong with the perimeter surveillance system. Martinez, a 25-year-old security specialist from Texas, had been manning the night watch in the base's security control room for 3 months. He knew every camera angle, every sensor zone, and every normal pattern of movement around FOB Apache. What he was seeing on his monitors defied all of those familiar patterns. Camera 7, which covered the eastern perimeter near the communications building, showed a heat signature moving along the fence line. But when Martinez switched to the visual feed from the same camera, there was nothing there. The thermal imaging clearly displayed a human-sized figure walking methodically along the perimeter, but the standard camera showed only empty ground and darkness. Martinez rubbed his eyes and checked his coffee intake. Night shifts could play tricks on tired minds, and he'd been pulling extra duty since the previous day's impossible equipment failures. But when he looked back at the monitors, the thermal signature was still there, now joined by 2 additional figures moving in precise formation. "This doesn't make sense," Martinez muttered, switching between thermal and visual feeds repeatedly. Every time, the thermal cameras showed 3 distinct human figures conducting what appeared to be a systematic survey of the base's perimeter defenses. Every time, the visual cameras showed absolutely nothing. Martinez reached for his radio to report the anomaly, but hesitated. After yesterday's incidents with the impossible equipment failures, the last thing he wanted was to add to the base's growing reputation for unexplained phenomena. Instead, he decided to document what he was seeing and investigate further. He began recording both feeds simultaneously, creating a split-screen view that showed the thermal signatures alongside the empty visual feeds. As he watched, the 3 figures completed their circuit of the eastern perimeter and moved toward the motor pool area where yesterday's vehicle failures had occurred. What happened next made Martinez question his own sanity. The thermal signatures appeared to walk directly through the concrete barriers surrounding the motor pool, not around them, not over them, but through solid concrete as if it didn't exist. On the visual feed, there was still no sign of the figures, just empty barriers and parked vehicles. Martinez immediately called his supervisor, Staff Sergeant Kelly Thompson, a veteran security specialist who'd been managing FOB Apache's surveillance systems since the base's establishment. Thompson arrived in the control room within minutes, her expression skeptical until she saw the monitor displays. "Corporal Martinez, how long has this been going on?" Thompson asked, studying the impossible thermal readings. "About 20 minutes, Staff Sergeant," Martinez replied, showing her the recorded footage. 3 figures conducting what looks like reconnaissance of our perimeter defenses, but they're only visible on thermal imaging, and they appear to be able to move through solid barriers. Thompson examined the recordings carefully, switching between different camera angles and checking the system diagnostics. Everything appeared to be functioning normally, yet the thermal cameras were clearly detecting something that shouldn't exist. "Have you notified anyone else about this?" Thompson asked. "No, Staff Sergeant. After yesterday's incidents, I wanted to verify what I was seeing before making any reports." Thompson nodded approvingly. "Good thinking. Let's expand our surveillance and see if we can track these, whatever they are, throughout the base." They began monitoring multiple camera feeds simultaneously, tracking the thermal signatures as they moved through FOB Apache with apparent purpose and intelligence. The figures seemed to be conducting a comprehensive survey of the base's defensive positions, communication equipment, and strategic assets. Most disturbing of all, they appeared to be paying particular attention to areas where yesterday's equipment failures had occurred. At 0347 hours, the thermal signatures converged on the administrative building where Staff Sergeant Webb worked. Thompson and Martinez watched as the figures appeared to enter the building through the main entrance, despite the visual cameras showing no door opening and no movement in the area. "We need to notify command," Thompson said, reaching for the secure phone line. "This is beyond anything our security protocols cover." As Thompson placed her call, Martinez continued monitoring the thermal signatures inside the administrative building. What he saw next would haunt him for the rest of his deployment. The figures moved directly to Webb's office, where they appeared to spend several minutes examining Webb's desk, computer, and filing cabinets. They moved with the systematic precision of trained intelligence operatives, but their ability to remain invisible to visual detection suggested technology far beyond anything in the current military arsenal. Colonel Martinez arrived in the security control room at 0415 hours, accompanied by the base's intelligence officer, Major Robert Kim, and Staff Sergeant Webb himself. Webb had been awakened and briefed on the situation, and his expression showed a mixture of concern and fascination as he reviewed the surveillance footage. "Corporal Martinez, I want you to walk me through exactly what you observed," Colonel Martinez said, settling in front of the monitor displays. Martinez began his detailed briefing, showing the recorded footage of the thermal signatures moving through the base. As he played back the sequences showing the figures examining Webb's office, Webb leaned forward with obvious interest. "They spent the most time at my desk," Webb observed, "specifically around the area where I keep my investigation files on yesterday's incidents." Major Kim, a 38-year-old intelligence specialist with experience in electronic warfare and counterintelligence, studied the footage with growing concern. The systematic nature of their movement suggests this is a coordinated intelligence operation, but the technology required to remain invisible to visual detection while showing up on thermal imaging, that's beyond anything we know about. Webb pulled out his notebook and began comparing the thermal surveillance with his investigation timeline from the previous day. As he cross-referenced the data, a disturbing pattern emerged. "Colonel, the timing of this surveillance correlates directly with my investigation activities yesterday," Webb said, showing his notes. "These figures appeared shortly after I began documenting the equipment failures, and they've focused their attention on every area I investigated." Colonel Martinez studied Webb's timeline carefully. "Are you suggesting that your investigation triggered this surveillance?" "It's possible, ma'am. Either my activities attracted their attention, or they were already monitoring the situation and responded to my involvement." As they discussed the implications, Specialist Park entered the control room with additional disturbing news. Her computer analysis from the previous day had revealed more anomalies in the base's digital systems. "Colonel Martinez, I've discovered something else about the computer intrusions yesterday," Park said, carrying a thick folder of printouts. "While our screens were black, someone accessed Staff Sergeant Webb's investigation files remotely. They downloaded everything: his incident reports, his timeline analysis, even his personal notes about patterns he was observing." Webb felt a chill run down his spine. His investigation files contained his growing suspicions about the incidents, including his observations about personnel who had been present during each failure. If someone had access to that information, they would know exactly what he was thinking and what direction his investigation was taking. "How is that possible?" Webb asked. "My files are encrypted and stored on a secured military network." Park shook her head. "That's what makes this so disturbing. The access bypassed all our security protocols using methods that our systems don't recognize. It's like someone has technology that can interact with our computers using principles that our security was never designed to counter. Major Kim reviewed Park's data with growing alarm. If this intelligence can access our most secure computer systems and conduct invisible surveillance of our base, then operational security has been completely compromised. Every mission, every defensive position, every personnel movement could be known to hostile forces. As the meeting continued, Martinez noticed something new on his monitors that made him interrupt the discussion. "Excuse me, Colonel, but the thermal signatures are moving again. They're heading toward the communications building." Everyone turned to watch the monitors as the three figures moved purposefully toward the communications center where yesterday's radio interference had occurred. As they approached the building, something unprecedented happened. The figures became visible on the standard cameras for approximately 3 seconds before disappearing again. In those brief moments, the visual cameras captured images that challenged everything the base personnel thought they understood about the situation. The figures appeared to be wearing some kind of advanced camouflage technology that seemed to bend light around them. They moved with human-like coordination, but wore equipment that didn't match any known military gear. "Did everyone else see that?" Colonel Martinez asked, staring at the monitor. "Affirmative, ma'am," Martinez replied, immediately beginning to save the footage. They were visible for approximately 3 seconds on cameras 12 and 14. Major Kim leaned forward to examine the brief visual capture more closely. "That technology, I've never seen anything like it. It's not just camouflage. It appears to be some kind of active optical camouflage that can render the wearer nearly invisible to standard visual detection." Webb studied the images with fascination and growing concern. "The equipment they're wearing doesn't match any military hardware I'm familiar with, and the way they move suggests extensive training in surveillance and reconnaissance." As they analyzed the brief visual capture, Staff Sergeant Chen's voice came over the base's communication system with an urgent announcement. All personnel, this is communications. We are experiencing unauthorized access to our radio systems. Someone is monitoring all our communications in real time and appears to be conducting electronic surveillance of all base communications." Colonel Martinez immediately grabbed her radio. "Communications, this is command. Are you able to identify the source of the surveillance?" Chen's response was crackling with static and interference. "Negative, command. The surveillance is using technology that our equipment can't track or counter, but we can confirm that every radio transmission, every phone call, and every digital communication is being intercepted and analyzed." The implications were staggering. Not only was the base under physical surveillance by invisible observers, but all communications were being monitored by an intelligence with technology that military countermeasures couldn't detect or prevent. Webb realized that his investigation had stumbled onto something far larger than equipment failures. FOB Apache was under comprehensive surveillance by an intelligence operation using technology that exceeded anything in the known military arsenal. The question was whether this represented advanced enemy capabilities, captured alien technology, or something even more disturbing. "Colonel, I recommend we assume that everything we've discussed has been monitored," Webb said quietly. "If they can access our computers and monitor our communications, they've probably heard every word of this briefing." As if responding to Webb's comment, every monitor in the security control room simultaneously displayed the same message in green text. "Your investigation is noted. Continue your work. You will understand soon." The message remained on screen for exactly 10 seconds before the monitors returned to normal surveillance feeds. The thermal signatures had vanished completely, leaving no trace of their presence except for the recorded footage and the lingering sense that FOB Apache was no longer under American control. Colonel Martinez immediately ordered a complete communications blackout and convened an emergency meeting of all senior personnel. As the base went into lockdown mode, Webb continued his investigation with the disturbing knowledge that everything he discovered was being observed by watchers who remained invisible, technologically superior, and completely unknown. But Webb had noticed something during the night's surveillance that the others had missed. In the brief moments when the figures had become visible, he'd caught a glimpse of something that suggested they might not be as alien as they appeared. One of the figures had moved with a slight limp that Webb recognized, the same limp he'd observed in someone on the base just days earlier. The Watchers might have advanced technology, but Webb was beginning to suspect they were more human than anyone realized. The question was, which humans, and why were they conducting such an elaborate deception? As dawn broke over FOB Apache, Webb prepared for another day of impossible incidents, knowing that his every move was being monitored by an intelligence that seemed to anticipate his thoughts before he thought them. But he also knew that even the most advanced technology operated by human hands could make mistakes. And when that mistake happened, Webb would be ready to discover the truth about who was really behind the incidents that were terrorizing his base and threatening the lives of every soldier under his protection.
A mysterious transmission from outside the base provides the first clue about the Watcher's true identity. But Webb discovers that the message contains information that only someone inside FOB Apache could know.